Hi, I'm Mary. And if you're a single woman over 40, you're a Christian, and you love God, but maybe you don't really love being single, this is for you. Today, I want to talk about being the hero of your own life. A lot of us grew up, probably all of us, grew up on stories about how Prince Charming comes and rescues the princess. And, I know in the last number of years, those types of fairy tales have really been criticized that, you don't need someone to come rescue you. And, I understand that, but part of the reason that women respond to those type of stories, and listen, when you look at little girls like 3 and 4 years old, okay, they don't know about, quote, the patriarchy or any of that kind of stuff. They very naturally in their play like to mimic what mommy is doing. They mimic playing house. They mimic taking care of their baby dolls. They like to dress up like a princess. In their play, they'll frequently, I watched my little niece when she was a little girl. She'd be out in the yard and she'd be playing and, oh, daddy, come rescue me. And I think the reason that women really are drawn to those types of stories is because we are wired by God for connection and partnership and support. And wanting love and companionship is completely natural and normal. That is how God designed us. But sometimes I think we can start to see of ourselves as someone who's just waiting to be rescued. A friend of mine is really struggling right now in her singleness. And, as you know, as a single woman, you have to do all the things. You have to take care of the car. You have to pay the bills. You have to save for your retirement. And it seems like almost everything that comes up in her life, she just sort of collapses into this, I just need a man. And listen, I get it because I need a man too. But when your whole perspective on life becomes, I just need someone to come rescue me from myself and rescue me from my bills and rescue me from my life. Listen, men love to be the hero, but they don't want to be a fixer for a broke down woman. I think part of what matters is the story that we tell ourselves. So we're in a culture right now that glamorizes victimhood. And, it's all about like your trauma, what you've gone through, what happened in your past, how you've been hurt. And listen, that's legit, okay? Everybody has experiences from their present or their past that were painful, okay? Nobody gets out of life unhurt. There's no such thing as a padded cross, okay? And I don't care, maybe you had a perfect, wonderful childhood. I guarantee you got your hurt after you left home. Okay, so that's just life on life's terms. But we're in a culture right now that says, well, you just need to stay there and just define yourself in terms of your trauma. The problem with that is you remain a victim. And as long as you're a victim, you're never going to have victory. So you can't play the victim in one area of your life and be a successful person in another area of your life. The good news is you just make one decision. Are you going to be a victim in your life or are you going to be a hero in your life? I do like to watch action movies, and one of my very favorite movies was Wonder Woman. And I used to love the old TV show with Linda Carter. Now, I have to say, honestly, the movie Wonder Woman 1984, really didn't like that. But the original Wonder Woman movie from 2017, I believe, I loved it. And it's amazing that when you watch any type of action movies or superhero type stories, who are you really rooting for? You're not rooting for the poor victim. You're rooting for the superhero. Like, you want the superhero to win. And the hero is able to move forward when things are difficult. The victim just stays defined by what happened. Again, I'm not saying that you don't acknowledge something that happened, of course, you must do that. You have to acknowledge something before you can heal it. Okay, the way I've heard it said is you have to deal with it so that you can heal it. And you may need to work with a therapist, you may need to find a support group, you may need to find a coach, or some group of friends that can help you. But a lot of times the challenge isn't really so much what happened in the past, it's how do we move forward now. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and she was having some challenges with a friend of hers. And the challenge was, the friend would say, I'm having this problem. And my friend would say, well, why don't you try this? And the response was, well, yeah, but. Well, why don't you try this? Well, yeah, but. And I've been in interactions like that. And what I have learned is, if someone's asking me for help and I'm giving them ideas and options and they're arguing with them, that tells me you don't really want the solution, you want the problem. Now, you might say, well, that's crazy. Who would want a problem? But a lot of times, what we get from the problem is we get attention and we get sympathy and we feel loved. Because when you're talking with a friend and you're talking about how sad and lonely and heartbroken you are, they're focused on you, and you feel like you're seen and heard and like you matter. But if someone is more interested in keeping the problem, then they're really more interested in staying in that place of victimhood rather than moving forward and being a hero. I think a lot of times as single women, we think, well, if I had a man, or if I had more money, or if I lived in a different place, or if I had a different job, or if I had good friends, then things would be easier, things would be better. Sometimes I think, especially when we're younger, we think, well, when I get married, I'll get a house. When I find a man, I'll get a pet, whatever. And the truth is that when we're waiting for another person to step into our lives to make things better, we're going to wait for a long time. Now, yes, a good relationship, I think, does make the lives of both people better. But really and truly, the only person who's really going to change your life is Jesus. And then you have to work with him to move forward and do something different. So let me talk a little bit more about what it would look like if you're stepping into the hero role. It doesn't mean that you're aggressive and harsh, but it means that you're clear about what you want, you're clear about what you need, and you're clear about what you will and you will not accept. For example, if you look back on your past and part of the problem was that, for example, no one stood up for you, that's been an issue for me. In my adult life, in professional and personal situations, when men, which I think is terrible, but that's another story, when men have verbally attacked me, I've been in settings where the men around me will just sit there and not stand up for me. And this is a great example, because what I started to learn was I can't count on someone else to stand up for me. I have to stand up for myself. Would I prefer it if a coworker or a man I'm dating or someone in my family, would I prefer it if they would stand up and say, hey, don't talk to her like that? Yeah, I probably would prefer that. But my experience has been that I can't count on that. I can't count on one of the men around me to rescue me in that situation. I have to be my own hero. And that means I have to handle disrespect in the moment. When you start standing up for yourself, being your own hero, people respond to you differently. Back in the day, when some of us were growing up, if there was someone bullying you at school, a lot of times your parents would say, all right, The next time they push you down on the ground and they take your Twinkies, you stand right back on up and you punch them in the nose. Now, I'm not advocating for violence. I'm not advocating that for physical assault on people. But that was the mindset when we were growing up. If someone's bullying you, fight back. And almost always what would happen is that bully would then respect you. Because the reason a bully remains a bully is nobody stands up to them. Everyone just sort of cowers in fear. And when you stand up to a bully, they will respect you. And I've noticed for myself, in relationships where someone feels like they can speak to me disrespectfully, when I have confronted it head on, and I don't mean not yelling, not screaming, not flipping out, but just by saying, don't speak to me like that, or very calmly saying, here's why I did this or this, because this, and this. What my personal experience has been that when I stood up for myself, and again, in a loving, calm way, the other person, they change how they act, because what you've done here is you flip the script. And that's part of what being a hero is. Like you think about action movies. So you've got this villain and nobody can overcome the villain, but then the hero shows up and the hero goes for it. And we think about David and Goliath in the Bible. And David goes, the Israelites are fighting the Philistines, and David says to his father, well, I want to go and take lunch to my brothers and, just kind of see what's up. So he shows up at the battlefield, and first of all, his brothers, what are you doing here? What'd you do with your few little sheep that you have? They just start on him. And Goliath is taunting the Israelites. And David says, guys, who's going to stand up to this guy? Like, he is downing our God. He's downing us. We're the chosen people of God. And the Israelites were all cowering in fear. Nobody wanted to go up against Goliath because he was literally a giant. And here David is, he said, something? I'm not going to stand here and let you talk about the holy God of Israel in this way. And David said, okay, you know what? When I was out there taking care of the sheep, God let me kill a lion. He let me kill a bear. And you know something? I'm going to kill this giant, because I am not going to stand here and listen to you berate and degrade our God. And that's that good, godly anger, if you will. And so that's why David was the hero, because he said, you know what? You guys are all cowering in fear. Goliath is just a man. Yes, he's a very big man. But if I could kill a lion and if I could kill a bear, I can kill this Philistine. And that's the mindset of the hero. You have more power than you think. And so if you hear yourself saying something like, well, my boss made me, or my family won't let me do this, or I don't have a choice. That's a big one. Well, I didn't have a choice. I don't have a choice. I have to blah, blah, blah. In the TV show, Madam Secretary, one of my very favorite lines is she says, somebody else is saying to her, well, you don't really have a choice. And Tia Leone, as the main character, says, I've never been in a situation where I didn't have a choice. Because you always have a choice. So stop saying things like, well, my boss made me do this, or my company won't let me do that, or I didn't really have a choice, because none of those things are true. You always have a choice. Now, if you want to do something and the company doesn't permit it, you have a choice. You can do it and risk being fired, or you can decide to do what the company says. But you want to start listening to your own words, because that's going to help you get a reading on where you are in this hero's journey for yourself. I would encourage you, if you feel like it would make sense for you, I would really encourage you to watch the Wonder Woman movie, or watch something that inspires you on the hero's journey and start to see yourself as the hero of your life. Now, we all have a prince who has saved us, okay? That's Jesus. And we're actually told in the Psalms, don't put your trust in princes, put your trust in God. And so we already have the Prince of Peace. He came and he saved us. Now, we then have the opportunity to be like David. Scripture tells us that David was a short, the scripture says he was ruddy, so he was like a short, not the best looking, young man. And God anointed him king, and he killed Goliath. And if you would have looked at David in the physical, there would not have been anything that would have screamed out, I'm the hero of the story. God tells us that he loves to use the weak and the foolish things of this world to confound the wise. But, God is a gentleman. He doesn't force us to do anything. And so we have to come into agreement with God. Amos 3:3 says, how can two walk together unless they be agreed? So God says, hey, I'm the ultimate hero. I've already given you the victory. That means that you have to take his hand and say, okay, I want to have a life of victory. And the reason that it's important for us to do this is because the world is dying for lack of knowledge, okay? People don't know about God, and they are looking for meaning and love and fulfillment in crazy places. And more people are angry and anxious and depressed. And as Christian women, if we can demonstrate the love and the power of God in our own lives, then other people will look at that and say, I want what she has. And it's not about you saying, I've got this big fancy degree, or it's because I have a lot of money. It's you saying, you know what? It's really not even me, it's the Lord. And that's why this stuff matters. Now, if you're dealing with a heartbreak, it can be very hard to feel like a hero. And if that's your case, underneath this video, or if you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. I've got a free training called the ABCs of Healing, totally free, and it walks you through how to start to recover from a broken heart. And I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.